had the best conversation ever, and I'm going to be completely transparent in the fact that it took us a little bit to get a little bit more conversational with this talk, but it was so good catching up with Julia. She is an ERPA right now, and then she works PRN as a hospitalist PA. We've had our dogs in the background the whole time. Sparrow. And I've been trying to keep them from squeaking and just been feeding them treats the whole time just to keep my dog quiet. And regardless of all of that stuff, we had a really great conversation about ERPAs, what their scope of practice is, what her job is like, what it's like if you want to work in an ER, and some just other PA school stuff, like how to do good in didactic year and how to do good on an interview or what to ask in an interview and just some other fun things. It's a long episode, but I think it is going to be super fun, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. Okay, so we're doing our introduction to specialty guest lecturers with people that I know and have also met through the internet, but I know you and from real life because I lived with you for a lot of months. 2 years. 2 years. Sure, yeah, we'll go with that. 2 years.
Yeah, basically.
So first you should just introduce yourself and then we'll chat and then we'll go into all the questions, I think.
Perfect.
Basically, it's just going to be a free form girl chat.
Heck yeah. I love this. So
Okay.
My name is Julia. Hello. I'm happy to be here. As mentioned, I lived with Isabel for basically 2 years in PA school. I am from Virginia, Southeastern Virginia specifically, so I'm a big beach person, and I work full-time in emergency medicine. I dabble at a labor pool or as needed in hospital medicine as well, out in rural Virginia, which is super awesome and super fun. But yeah, I've been working full-time in emergency medicine for 9 months now. Crazy enough. That was a fast 9 months. And I also, last month in December, just finished my master's of public health. So I've got a little bit of that passion that I pursue as well. And the past year, once we graduated and I was like, what the heck do I do with my life? I've been making TikTok content because it's fun.
Going viral.
Yeah, that was unexpected. But it's so much fun, getting to, post funny videos that are relevant to what we've been through, and if they can help someone a little bit or just laugh or find the content useful for school, then awesome. But it's been super fun.
It's kind of like a fever dream a little bit, though.
It is, yeah. And I also started an Etsy shop last year called the PA Papers that is also directed towards people who want to go to PA school or people who are in PA school, to just give them study resources, study plans, organization tools, that sort of thing to help getting into and getting through PA school. So that's been also a creative outlet. So between the Etsy store and TikTok, I've just been using that creativity lobe so much the past year, which is really nice. I feel like PA school kind of inhibits that. You don't really get to do a lot of that.
Yeah.
No.
My creative outlet was plants. I had all those plants during didactic year. It was awful. My room was a jungle.
It was. You had a lot of plants. That's okay, though. The air was fresh.
Yeah, it was good. Apparently, it helps with people who have asthma, like myself. Helps with the oxygen concentration.
Perfect. The air was so fresh.
It was. Okay, so you have your master's of physician assistant studies, your master's of public health, and then now you work full time in the ER, and then only as needed as a hospitalist, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So, why did you want to work in emergency medicine? I know the answer, but nobody else does.
Yes. So I spent 2 years before school working full-time in an emergency room and part-time in an emergency room. So I was a patient care assistant and a scribe, and then eventually the chief scribe at the same ER. And I was basically there every day, but it was a great experience. I was used my EMT certification to do the PCA position, which was great. Especially because I don't really like going into strangers' homes. So I was happy being in the ER where I didn't have to do that.
Didn't have to actually travel anywhere.
Right. But could still use my certification. And Dude, I just fell in love with the ER. It is organized chaos. It is like this beautiful, like orchestra is kind of how I think of it in my head, where
Yeah.
yes, all of the instruments are probably singing or playing a different tune, but they're all in the same musical, if that makes sense. Like they all have
No,
the
that makes
same
sense.
goal. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's it's just I don't know, there's like this beauty to it and you get to talk to so many different people every single day. Like I I'm a person who likes routines, and the fact that I like the ER, I feel like is one thing that doesn't really fit into that because the ER does not come with a routine. You don't know what your day is
Right.
going to look like, but I I don't know that I want to be outpatient, at least for the foreseeable future, and like have a
Yeah.
schedule and stuff. I like the unexpectedness that comes with like every day at work, and will I get to do this skill today? Will I get to see this today? And I just love it. I love to talk to people, which is why I couldn't do what you do because your
I
patients
know you
are
love to
asleep a
talk to
lot.
people. I'm like the biggest introvert. I'm like, I like it when my patients are asleep on the
Yeah.
table. I'm like in the ICU and they're all real quiet in there.
Right.
I love to
But
talk to people too, but I'm like you're of the two of us, you're the extrovert.
I
Like
am.
you could talk to anybody.
Yeah. And I like that. I love that. Like, let me sit here and stitch you up for an hour, and I'm gonna probably learn most of your life
Your
story. Where
life
are you
story.
from? Like, how'd you get here? What do you do for work?
Mhm. Mhm. I don't remember. Was that when you were a tech? Was that where you first saw PAs, or was that like because you took a gap year?
I did.
So is
Yeah.
that where you? I don't remember when you decided to go PA because I knew
Yeah.
you were always medical, like you were always
Right.
pre healthcare, I guess.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I was like, I really want to be an optometrist.
Odd. That's random.
Random.
Because like
Random.
your family's all in dentistry.
They are. And
They're
well,
not
nothing in me,
optometrists.
right. Nothing in me wanted to go the dental route. Being constantly in the mouth was not for me. I wanted a little bit more like variety.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess when I was like 17, I was like, the eyes are the window to the soul. Like, oh my gosh,
That's
17-year-old
adorable.
me was like a little hippie wannabe. And so she really wanted to become an optometrist. And then I got to freshman year orientation and, our undergrad institution. So we went to the
Mm-hmm.
same undergrad. I guess we should
We
mention that.
did. Oh yeah, we also
Uh,
went to the same college, but we
we
never
did.
knew each other.
We never
And
knew
we
each
had the same
other.
major. And it was a
Never
small
knew each
major
other.
too.
Yeah,
I think it was like
crazy.
50 of us in the whole school at a time.
Hmm. At like, and only 2 years apart, never knew each other.
Exactly.
And they did like the freshman orientation intro to pre-health, pre-med, like seminar that you could go to during orientation week. And that is really where I learned about the PA profession, honestly, and like what it took
Yeah.
to become a PA. I don't think I really understood the background and the training until that seminar that day. And for all transparency purposes, I was very interested in the fact that you could go to PA school in 2.5 years and
Mm-hmm.
there was no residency. There was
Yep.
like fellowship is optional and then you're practicing. So in my head, I was like, okay, well, I'm 18 now. I'll graduate at 22 and I can go straight into PA school and I'll be done by the time I'm 26 and I'll be practicing and life will be great. Um, and that's initially what kind of pulled me in was you don't have to go to 4 years of medical school plus a residency. But
Mm-hmm.
then as I moved through like healthcare opportunities during undergrad was when I became more passionate about it and there became actual some substance behind my reason for pursuing PA. So I got to volunteer during undergrad at the Lackey Clinic. So free clinic.
Yes.
Yes, I
I
love.
remember you were one of their you became like one of the not a manager. You
I
know what
was
I
one of
mean?
their scribes
Yes.
and then did some like secretarial stuff for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You did both. You did scribing and you did some of the stuff on the other side because
Yes.
that's what got you interested in public health.
Right. Right. So I spent some time over there. I initially was just like answering phone calls in their dental clinic side of things. And
Appropriate.
then, right. I know, right.
Makes
Again, with
sense.
the dentistry. Yeah. Well, that's actually where my first job was. My first job was in a dental clinic. I sometimes forget that. Like when I was
Really?
16. Yeah, I when I was 16, I ended up getting a job at the office where my mom works at just for the summer. Was
Uh-huh.
working like 3 days a week, 8 to 5, mainly just to like pay for gas and
Uh-huh.
Chick-fil-A. But
Yep.
that was my first job, and that's actually how they picked out my application when I was applying to volunteer at Lackey. Was they saw I had experience in a dental clinic, and they were like, "Oh, we need somebody for our dental clinic to just like answer the
Mm-hmm.
phones and knows relevant stuff, basically." And that's what opened the door to scribing, but also opened the door, like you mentioned, to like my public health passion, because when I was on the dental side of things, I got to sit in the same office as their eligibility coordinator, and she was essentially responsible for contacting patients who had reached out trying to become patients at the clinic, and talking about their socioeconomic status, their employment status, housing situations. She was always working on those phone calls while I was in the office with her, and that's really what ignited my passion for improving access to care. Because
Mm-hmm.
between volunteering at that clinic and working in the emergency room after undergrad, the amount of people who don't have health insurance or don't have access to a primary care office and use the ER and don't know about resources in their community that they can use for help with healthcare, like, blew my mind. It's such a problem. Like, just because it's 2024 and we've had a touch of healthcare reform doesn't mean that we have fixed the system. The system is so broken that it's going to take multiple huge upheavals, basically,
Yeah.
to get us to where we need to be. But that is through both of those experiences is how I eventually became very passionate about pursuing the PA path, because as PAs, we do have that lateral mobility. We are trained as general practitioners. We can start in, the emergency room, but if
Mm-hmm.
you feel a calling or you see a need in primary care, you can do that too, which is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And we're so useful and we're cost effective, and that is where the passion really came from. I think that, you know 18-year-old me, her intentions were really good, and she set out on this path. Thank God she did.
Yep.
But there was not a lot of substance behind the desire yet
Right.
until
It
I
was
was
kind of
able
like
to.
you picked it, but you had a gut instinct, and then that was really what
Right.
you just ran
Exactly.
with that.
Yes, I did. Thank God she did. She was super determined too.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
we were like, we're going to PA school. That's it. Blinders.
Well, you
Good
need
for
that because
her.
even in PA school, you were always like, you just always like pushed yourself. We had a couple mentee bees. Like there were a
Oh,
solid couple mentee bees, but you
absolutely.
were very good at jumping back into student mode in PA school. Like instantly, I could tell you were like, I may not remember how to study, and you definitely admitted that you struggled a little bit, but by like the first fall, I remember you were like, I'm on this anatomy stuff. Like you
Oh,
were
yeah.
you were on that the whole course.
Absolutely. Well, anatomy in PA school is unlike any monster I've ever tackled before in my life.
It was so
It
hard.
is so hard. You thought undergrad anatomy was hard and that it couldn't get any worse, and then it does, times like 10.
Mhm. Yep.
And so I was, I refused to be defeated by that freaking class. So then the second semester went much better. We learned how to study
Uh-huh.
for it.
We did.
Heck yeah.
The
But it was,
first
I
the,
mean, it was kind of weird, like jumping back into being a student after taking a gap year.
yeah, there was an adjustment period. And we started during COVID, so we were just triple screwed, I think.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we were struggling because we were trapped in the apartment. We were doing things distant. We didn't
Hmm.
know how to be a student, and we couldn't hang out with people older or our age. And then we were trying to actually just do the material too. So it was kind of a not fun time in the
It
beginning.
was,
I
yeah,
don't feel like it was a great time in the beginning.
it was awful. I feel like I know that my brain has an issue of looking back on things and romanticizing them.
Yeah.
Um, it was not a good time though. It was terrible. It was awful.
In the moment, it was so bad. And
Yeah.
now we can say, now that we're through it, it's so much easier to be like, oh, you can do it. you'll be okay. Everything's gonna be fine. Just it's not as bad as you think it is. Like
Right.
like my mentor would tell me stuff like that, and I was like, I love you. I don't believe you.
Right. Right. Like, I love you. Please validate me right now, you
Yeah.
know?
I was like, please just she did such a good job of just making me feel better about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It was hard,
So
dude.
it was, yeah, which honestly, I feel like can be a whole episode in of itself. We should just review
We could.
everything.
We could get Kelly
um,
on here for that.
I think we should. I think that would be the perfect thing to do. And then
Yeah.
the three of us can just I might cry because I have not addressed some of those moments yet. So I know we talked about why ED and we talked about
Hmm.
why that even started because it started in college before PA school.
Hmm.
So, why did you pick this job in particular? Because this is your
Hmm.
second
It
ER
is
job.
this is my second ER job. So my first job in the ER out of school, I was hired before we graduated. And I'm going to go, my little side note about being like close to graduation as a PA student. You do not have to have a job by graduation. Do not
No.
like
Oh my
rush
gosh,
yourself
no.
into a position.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I felt so much stress to be like, oh, she's hired, has a job.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I graduated, you're still not going to
It means
start for four
nothing.
months.
Yeah,
It
it
means
didn't mean
nothing.
anything. Yeah.
And it might not even be the right fit. So, there's no rush there. But I took a job right before we graduated and was super excited about that. The hang up with that job is I was rotating through 5 different departments. So you didn't
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of consistency with like nursing and tech staff, which was difficult at first, especially because
It
I
was.
was traveling over an hour to these job sites.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know anyone in those communities to begin with. And now you're not even getting the consistency of like
Your day
staffing.
to day.
Yeah, so it just made it a really rocky transition, and I was working for like one of the like a really big ER group, so I was constantly with a new attending too. And the one thing about working in the ER, or just honestly working as an APP in general, is every attending that you work with is going to have a different way of how they do things and a different
Mm-hmm.
style that might not align with how you practice. So constantly, I think for the first 4 weeks at least that I was there, every single shift I was with someone new. And when you're working like 3 to 5 shifts a week, because I wasn't doing 12s at that point, and when you're working 3 to 5 shifts a week and you're constantly meeting someone new, it's
Yeah.
just
It was
like
a lot.
it's overwhelming. Yeah. But eventually got the hang of it. I ended up though finding a position that was closer to home, and so I have a nice 15-minute commute now, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the same department every shift that I go to, which is awesome. And it's also for the health system that I worked for before I went to PA school. So I'm back to serving my local community, which I've always been a bit more passionate about. For all transparency purposes, I feel so connected to the area where I live and where I'm from
Yeah.
that being able to come back and work and help this community specifically has been really it just gives me a little bit more purpose
Yeah.
um in going to work every day. So yeah, it's been really good to be back. It's been exciting. I've like
Yeah.
gotten to work with some of the attendings that I used to scribe for, which
Oh no.
yes, it's just so different. It's so different.
I've had that happen where I've been running into nurses who I was their CNAs before PA school.
Oh my
And
god.
now they're nurses in like the ERs. Like one of the
Yeah.
trauma RNs is somebody I worked with at the rehab facility I was at before PA school. And she was like, we're in the middle of a trauma resuscitation. And she goes, Isabel? And I went, hi. And she was like, hey. And I was like, can't talk. And she was like, no, no, yeah. We're like back right in it. And just seeing people you used to know, like I see one of the attendings I used to work for in the physician's lounge all the time. And he's always like, hey, Izzy. I'm like, hi. He's like, you're a PA now. And I'm like, uh-huh. it,
Yeah.
it do be different.
It do be different. It do be different. I
Yeah.
ran into So I'm with the same health system, but at a different facility. So there's a lot of overlap, but then there's also some attendings that I just never see because they stayed at our big facility where I used to work. And I ran into one of them recently and he was like, "So was it worth it?" And I was like, "Absolutely worth it. You would
Uh-huh.
maybe have to pay me a lot of money to do it again. But now that it's
Right.
done, absolutely
It's all
worth it."
fine.
Yeah.
Everything's okay now.
Yes.
So, what do you I think something that we could talk about really quickly is just because I had a couple people reach out who are pre-PA and current pre-PA students. So there's like two populations that are planning to listen. And I know we talked about it because we did our lecture at our alumni program last week. But what is within your scope of practice at as an ER? Like what does an ER, APP, or PA in your case can you do? Or and then I guess what do you do in reality on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, yeah. So our scope is really wide, but it's really going to come down to the facility where you work and what the need is at that facility. So when I was working in a pretty decent sized city for our state,
Yeah.
um, my scope was a lot smaller there. So just starting with the variety of things that we can see is we can see everything from an urgent care complaint to working a code that's within our
Mm-hmm.
scope in this state. And as far as procedures go, I mean, I can be doing everything from suturing lacerations to placing central lines, doing
Mm-hmm.
intubations. And I know that you've talked a little bit about your scope and you do a lot more like chest tubes, stuff like that.
Yeah.
We don't typically get to do as much like trauma resuscitation, definitely like
Mm-hmm.
as wide as your scope is, but we can definitely intubate, we can definitely start central lines and do some of those critical care stuff, which is it's super exciting. And
Yeah.
then when it comes down to like facility based, when you're in your larger metropolitan areas and you're not a trauma center, you're maybe not going to have as wide of a scope working in the ER compared to someone that's like working in a rural hospital. When
Yep.
I did one of my last rotations of PA school, I went to a rural ER to do like the 8 weeks, the long rotation for our
Yes,
program.
I remember that. Uh-huh.
And the critical care skills that I got to do being in a rural environment where there's a higher need and less staff and less help was significantly higher than the skills that I was doing um, at the regional medical center.
It's
Sorry, we're
okay.
just
We're just feeding our dogs this whole time.
casual
I've been
dog
feeding
noises.
that's what I keep doing this. I keep feeding my dog treats so
Yes.
he's quiet.
Yes. um, but yeah, so when I was at the regional medical center, totally got to do a ton of like the bedside stuff. So lac repairs, incision and drainage.
Yep.
But then when I went to the rural facility, I'm like doing lumbar punctures, central lines, intubations, stuff like that. And at the scope, I love our ability to practice to the full extent of our scope. And I'm all for, if it's within our scope, then we should be able to do it and be
Sure.
credentialed for it.
Yep.
So, day to day, I'm working on becoming credentialed for things like intubation, central lines, because I'm still new. I'm still
Yeah.
very early in that process. But, every day I'm probably going to do at least one lac repair. Very common to see incision and drainage in the ER,
That was something I
that
didn't
sort of
know
thing.
about until I did my ER rotation. I saw so many abscesses
So many
or like
abscesses.
like infected cysts kind of
Yeah.
thing or ruptured cysts, like a lot more than I ever
Yes.
thought. It's way more common than people think about. And I guess it's just important because I was like technically I was doing subcutaneous injections to give lidocaine. I was using a
Yeah.
scalpel. I was packing wounds. Like those things are like if you've never done them before, kind of scary,
Yeah,
especially as a
they are.
student.
Right. Especially as a student. I've gotten to where, like, now that I'm practicing, I do a good amount of like blocks and injections for things. Recently,
Mm,
I've done a few different injections for like occipital neuralgia. So, occipital nerve blocks
cool.
has
Yeah,
become a
yeah.
new skill, which is really satisfying because those patients can get a lot of relief really quick
Good.
for like a condition that's really painful and uncomfortable. Um, but then, like we've also, the world of emergency medicine is starting to dive so heavily into ultrasound. So that's
It
been
is.
a
Mm-hmm.
new skill as well. we took an ultrasound course in
We
PA
did.
school. Was helpful, but because we were with COVID, I feel like we maybe didn't get as much out of it
Right.
as maybe like they do now that it's like back to being in person. So having some like on the job training for ultrasound recently has been awesome. So we've done some eye ultrasounds, looked at some babies, and then just like always working on doing a fast exam.
Yeah.
We have we have we're having some issues with ultrasound coverage at my facility, just
Mhm.
temporarily, and so being able to do that skill on my own, just to, rule in or out
Be able
things
to.
very quickly and then be
Right.
able to have them come back in for a more formal study later is super helpful.
Yeah.
But the whole like ER culture is definitely moving more towards ultrasound because it's non-invasive, gives us a
Yeah.
lot of information, and it rocks. So that's been kind of like a fun little surprise to get to use.
Yeah. And we're doing a
Yeah.
lot of IR of ultrasound guided procedures too. So we're not
Mm.
doing just diagnostics now. It's like doing like IR guide or ultrasound guided paracentesis and all
Oh
kinds of
yeah.
different stuff.
Heck yeah.
Like in the
Ultrasounds are
ER.
everywhere. Yeah.
Hmm.
They rock.
So are you doing, I guess, something I didn't know about the ER until I did my ER rotation, which was that was my second rotation, I think. And it was down by you,
Hmm.
but I didn't realize that this is just so naive. I didn't realize there's like a main track and fast
Hmm.
track or like different designations that people were
Yeah.
being triaged like most of the time before they even get there. And there were actually different assignments for where they go, and different providers are assigned to different places. So, how does that work at your job, or I guess just in general? Because I'm hoping I'm not the only one who didn't know that. And our PAs usually stuck in fast track, and they're only seeing that. In reality, I know that you're seeing a lot of complexity, even if you are in fast track, because it's not a foolproof system. But
Hmm.
if you could just talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to look so different depending on what facility that you're at. So when I was at my first job, we did a ton of like PIT provider stuff. So provider and triage, where you are basically sitting with the triage nurse
Mhm.
and seeing the patients at the same time that they're triaging to essentially just like triage with them slash do a quick exam and then place orders and help work with the triage nurse to determine where this patient's going to go. Can they go to more of a fast track setting, or do they need to go to more of like a core higher level of care setting in the department? And a lot of
Sure.
this comes down to just emergency department overcrowding that's happened. If we can keep a patient who's really just like a fast track complaint. So things that are typically could be seen at like an urgent care, if we can move them faster, that sort of thing,
Right.
um, to just kind of help with overcrowding, then let's do that. So my new facility that I work at now is just starting to kind of dive into this right now, just because initially they weren't having as much of the volume to require it, and we're getting to the point where they're needing that.
Now you need
Hence
it.
why I was even brought on as staff.
Yeah.
um, they need
I know.
more people. Yeah.
I know that was like mine. They were like, actually, we just created a new position because we need help. And I was like,
Yes. Yes.
okay.
Yeah, which was good. It was like no one's leaving, which is great. It's just, hey,
Yeah.
we
We're
need
expanding.
extra hands. Yeah. So we're just kind of starting to dive into that role. But I mean, yeah, you sit up front with the triage nurse, you're seeing the patients with them as they roll through the door and, determining, can they go to fast track? Can they go to the core side? And it's based on acuity. So you'll see the emergency severity index used, or ESI, that assigns like an
Hmm.
acuity level to patients. So 1 is your most critical, 5 is your least critical patients. So examples of a patient who would be like a level 5 acuity would be someone who like just needs a medication refilled, whereas a level 1 acuity is going to be like a cardiac arrest sort of thing.
Yeah.
I really appreciate and value these departments that are still trying to maintain our scope while, implementing these new policies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of healthcare systems that have really just taken their APPs and moved them into triage.
Mm-hmm.
And some people really like it, some people really don't like it. I'm kind of middle of the road on it. It's necessary. It does, like the literature is showing, it is helping with wait times. It is helping reduce length of stay. It's helping reduce, patients who leave without being seen, which is one of the biggest liabilities, right? You have a patient who came in for chest pain. The wait's too long. They leave, and then they walk out and they have a massive MI. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not good for anyone. That's definitely not good for the patient. It's not good for us as healthcare providers because it puts us just in, it's hard,
Yeah.
seeing that happen to our patients because we do care. And it's so the literature is supporting that this process works. But there's some healthcare systems that are starting to maybe limit their providers to just sitting up in triage all day. So the thing about it is the structure looks so different. Like if you're thinking about going into emergency medicine after school, ask these questions when you're on an interview. Am I going to be able to see the patient in triage and then keep them? Or am I going to be able to see the patient in triage and I'm strictly placing orders and then I'm letting someone else take over that
The
patient?
rest.
What does your
Uh-huh.
process look like? How long have you been doing it? What's been the feedback from it? Like, these are all really important questions to ask because sitting in a triage room and only placing orders and not really getting to do what you were taught to do can lead to a really high level of burnout really fast. So,
Right.
just like asking what the flow is like and being familiar with
Can
how the
help.
department moves can really help if you're
Yeah.
interested in going into that field.
Like, don't be afraid to ask those questions just because you're nervous. You're going to somehow turn them off from you as a
Right.
interviewee because you don't want to end up being blindsided. So it's better to just be upfront and ask the more direct questions and get it
Right.
and just see how they respond to it.
Yeah.
At least that was
Oh,
my
yeah.
experience as like a new like when I was interviewing at other places. It was just
Yeah.
better to ask.
Right.
I didn't want to take a contract and have questions unanswered basically. And
Right.
sometimes you don't know
Exactly.
what to ask and you're still going to be surprised, but
Right.
I don't know.
Or know like what your interview is going to look like.
Or that too. I know those. I remember all those. So next, I think I wanted to ask. We'll do like my last thing that I prepped, and then we'll do the questions that everybody else prepped.
Okay.
So, what was the hardest part about transitioning from student to PA, particularly as it
Um,
pertains to like ER, I guess, or just
yeah.
you?
Yeah. Um, so I don't feel like my imposter syndrome was that bad until I'm looking back on the first few months of practice and comparing it to where I am now. So a lot of hypervigilance in those first few months.
Oh
I
my
remember
gosh, yes.
I
We,
remember
I,
the first time that I placed an order for morphine. I think I quadruple checked it.
mm-hmm.
Knowing how to manage things like um, sickle cell pain crisis, where you're giving a lot of narcotics,
Yeah,
was very just stress inducing and a little bit overwhelming as a new grad. I think a lot of the things that gave me the most stress when I first came out of school, and the thing that I had to get used to the most was you are responsible now. Like, it is no longer your preceptor's name on that discharge paperwork.
yep.
It's yours. There's no long it's your name on the orders, it's your name on the documentation. It's
Mm-hmm.
all you. And I wish that as a clinical year student, towards the end of things, I would have thought more in that mindset of, okay, if this was my patient and I wasn't working with a preceptor, what would be my plan? And not so much looking for validation from
Mm-hmm.
preceptors toward the end of the year, and I think that's just like a natural flow of being in school and being a student for so long, is you're constantly looking for this external validation that you
Right.
get probably from grades, like,
Yeah, it's like you transition from getting it from these people who are your teachers instead of
yes,
actually giving you a letter grade in an objective way. There is no we have guidelines, but there's not really an objective measure
right,
of if you made the right decision. So you have to
right.
ask somebody else.
Yes, exactly. And it's practicing medicine, right? Like it's all so based on what literature did you read and opinions and, ultimately at the end of the day, doing what's best for the patient in a safe way. And so I think that was probably the biggest thing that I was not expecting to be so like overwhelming was just the amount
Mm-hmm.
of it's such a huge responsibility. And I think that it's really easy to just get caught in the school mentality of I'm going to be a PA student and I'm going to be a student and I'm going to be a student and then all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
it's like no, I'm a
Not.
PA now,
Mm-hmm.
you
Exactly. Well, and
know.
I think the hypervigilance, that's such a good descriptor. And I remember, I think it was one of my first 24-hour shifts. I was like, guys, I didn't sleep. I sat in the ICU and I just watched monitors on like on a screen at the nurse's station for like 12 hours straight and then would like leave if I had to go round or something was happening, of course. But I was like, I didn't sleep at all. I was just watching this one patient who I was concerned about, who I was ordering, like, I was titrating pressors and I was doing
Hmm.
fluid resuscitation, which I had never done before. I was like, I'm just not going to leave. I just sat there. And that's how I got to be such good friends with the ICU nurses, which you
Heck
should
yeah.
do. They are your best friends. But
Yes.
they were like, you're good. Like, you could go, because they know that we do 24-hour shifts. So they're like, you could go like to the call room for 30 minutes. I was like, I'm good.
No,
Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
I can't leave.
I can't go anywhere. Okay, I'm going to jump into the questions from the other people.
Heck yeah.
We'll see we'll see. Okay, so the first one isn't specific to your specialty, but I think you're going to be perfect for answering it anyways. But this person wanted to know how you can thrive during didactic year. Like what
Ah,
are your tips for excelling or thriving in didactic year? Which good luck answering that question because that's a long question in my
it's a
opinion.
hard question. First of all, does anyone
How long do you
actually
have?
thrive?
Do
Does,
we thrive? Do we
does
thrive ever
anyone
in PA
thrive
school?
during time?
If you are, we should talk because
We should,
I
yes.
would have loved to be your friend.
So didactic is so hard. I think just remembering that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yep.
Didactic gets a lot easier during your last semester of it because you can finally see the end. I think the biggest things that got me through didactic was going to the gym regularly.
Yeah.
Typically after class, my brain needed a break.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in class all day long. I need just like an hour to not think about school and to just listen to music and move my body. So it doesn't have to be going to the gym. It can be taking a walk. It can be like, honestly, it can be just shutting your eyes for like 30
Yep.
minutes is fine too.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get your mind off of things. Because if you don't detach from the environment, it will consume you. That's the thing about
Yeah.
didactic is you're kind of playing this with this fire that will set you on fire with
It's a
it
bit of a
if you
risky
let it.
game. Because PA
Yes,
school was the time, or didactic year in particular, that was the lesson that I learned is probably how to respect and appreciate the fact that I'm never going to know everything.
right,
And I needed to reach a threshold for our board exam of competency and recognize that as long as I can meet that competency level that they have determined to prove that I am a competent provider,
right,
I don't need to be perfect or have every single thing memorized because
right.
it's no longer a competition with my peers. Now they're just colleagues. Like
Yeah,
we're not beating anyone out. Our PA school, we don't rank people like that. We don't do that. It was literally just to get us to pass the boards. That was a hard adjustment, not gonna lie. I was chasing grades for probably the first, how long was our didactic? I was doing it probably for the first 8 months.
yeah.
I
It
don't
was
think I stopped
18.
until after spring semester, until
Sure.
summer.
Yeah. Because it's hard, when you're in that competitive mindset to get into school, it's really hard to turn it off when you get there. And so, just a reminder, and I loved that we did this in our apartment. We never talked about grade numbers. Like,
No, never
did
numbers.
never numbers. It was just, did you pass? Did you not pass? That was all.
Yeah,
Because we had to get an 80% or better on
yeah.
on test.
Right. That was like our benchmark. And
Yeah.
that was something the school set up originally. And I think it was, if you were close or under that, you were supposed to initiate a conversation with your faculty advisor who would talk to you
Hmm.
about the test itself and then help you come up with study plans if you needed them, basically, just to touch base. But
Right.
I think that was one of the best things we ever did for ourselves, which was like, not even you, we never talked grade numbers. It
No.
was not unless we had the rule. I remember I said the rules like, but if I don't hit benchmark, I might tell you the number because I might want
Yeah.
help. Like
Yeah.
we said, if you need help, it's when you're below benchmark or like then you can reveal a number if you want to,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that helped keep the competition out of it in our own little
Yeah.
environment, because when you're already living like on top of each other and you're in such like high stress stakes, it's
Mm-hmm.
being in a competition environment even at home is exhausting really fast. So
Yeah.
I think that was really good that we did that, having a routine. But you have to take time for yourself. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of people recently on social media and stuff specifically say that, I don't have time for myself during didactic. You don't, but you have to make it. So
Mm-hmm.
usually on like Friday nights. Friday nights would usually be my
Chick-fil-A
time.
Fridays.
Chick-fil-A Fridays. I'm
Chick-fil-A
going to go to the gym.
Fridays.
I'm going to get Chick-fil-A, and then I'm going to come home. I'm going to eat that
Some nuggets
Chick-fil-A.
and a Sprite.
Yep. And then I'm
That
just
was
going
the
to
bill.
like shower, watch Netflix, hang out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're not studying, we're not doing schoolwork that night. We're relaxing. And then if you want to, sleep in on Saturday and then get up and study.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to give yourself some time. I promise that taking 3 hours to just chill and watch something on Netflix is not going to make or break you for the semester.
No, it's not. One, study tips and didactics and how people approached learning book material. I think this question's interesting because it's different for everybody. Because you were a
Hmm.
solo studier.
Hmm.
Like you were not somebody who I just don't think you did well with the study groups. I think
Hmm.
you told me once, like, it was just overwhelming. Like, you couldn't focus,
I
people
get
would get off
so
task.
distracted.
Like, you
Yes.
couldn't stay in. Whereas, and I thought I was that person. Turns out I was not. Turns out Kelly and I were like lasered in on each other for studying. Like, we dragged each other because for us, it ended up working great because we would stay after class. So we didn't leave. We would stay on campus, go to a room, and then talk through everything that they had said in class, redo the notes, and then we would leave. We did
Yeah.
that like every single day towards
Yeah.
the end, like once we had a routine.
Right. Right. And it's all about finding what works for you. I thought, like, when I was an undergrad, I was a huge flashcard girly. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that when I got to PA school, I was going to keep being a flashcard girly. And
Nope.
I was not. I just didn't have time. There's so much information. You have to be so specific about what it is that you're putting on the flashcards that it just wasn't really a benefit. I did upgrade my Quizlet account to like premium or something,
Oh, I did
and
too.
that was useful for certain things. But I ended up changing to more of like a self recitation. I know that you
Mm-hmm.
could hear me
I could
talking to
hear you
myself in
talking
my
to
room.
yourself. I was like, she's either on the phone, but that doesn't sound right because those are like numbers from the muscle chart and that don't make sense.
Self recitation was my jam. So you got to like play with your study like method, and just do what's best for you at the end of the day, and
Mm-hmm.
surround yourself with people who understand that too and have the same, motivation, and have a
Yeah.
routine.
Yeah. We went through probably, I mean, our cohort certainly, but I think we went through every study resource that you can possibly use except for like Anki. I didn't use Anki.
Yes,
I
we
had
didn't use
Quizlet
Anki.
Premium our first semester. I got Osmosis. We had Osmosis for the first year,
Mhm.
and that was only good, in my opinion, for pharmacology. I didn't need it for
Wonderful
anything
for farm.
else.
Yeah.
And then after that, I got Smarty Pants. I think we
Hmm.
both got it in the spring semester of
Yep.
like our second semesters when we got it.
Hmm.
And then I don't what else did we use? That
I
was
think that's
really
about
those
it.
were the
Pants
big
prep
like
pearls.
Prince Prep Pearls. We got those
Hmm.
books. I got the Made Ridiculously Simple books and then like a
Hmm.
whiteboard. I had a huge whiteboard
Huge
and would
whiteboard.
like write particularly for anatomy because we were drawing and trying to memorize numbers and letters and things that didn't make sense. And
Right.
so a whiteboard was good because then I didn't have to crumple up paper every single day.
Yes. Yes. Like, so I made a TikTok this week that was about some of my favorite mnemonics from PA school. And just even putting that for anatomy specifically, and just putting
5, 6, 7.
together that, oh my gosh, there's a little bit of PTSD associated with that.
Uh-huh. 6, 7, 8. Don't jail me, mate. I can keep
Yes.
going. I have them still. So they work. They were quite effective.
Madlick,
Oh yeah, Madlick.
Madlick.
I tried
Yeah.
using that on one of my clinical rotations, and my surgeon was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, Madlick. And he was like, "No." I was like, "Okay, no, no, yeah. What do I know? I'll just
What do I know?
whatever you say, dude."
Right,
Yeah.
right, right, right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also just funny being in clinical practice and hearing how other people remember their
There.
their
Yeah.
things, you know? Like
Uh-huh.
we were working this kid up a few weeks ago for Kawasaki disease and I was like, "Oh, crash and burn." And they were like,
Uh-huh.
"What?"
Oh.
And I'm like, "Oh, you mean you don't know crash and burn?"
It's like, oh, I know something you don't know.
Yeah. And then just hearing some of their mnemonics and I'm like, "Oh, you mean not everybody learned how I how I learned?" Wow.
No, because I'm not a good memorizer, is what I realized. I don't
Mhm.
memorize, but I do like patterns. So if I can find
Yes.
patterns, like with the muscle chart in particular for anatomy, that was where we did good. Or with pharmacology, a lot of the names have the same ending. So
Yes.
you could keep classes together at least. Although antibiotics was our first test in pharmacology, and it almost broke every single one of us.
Every
I
single one
mean,
of us.
it almost like that was the one. Like first
Yes.
class, we left and everybody was like home, like crying.
Pain.
I got in my
Pain.
car and I cried. It hurt.
Yeah. That was an overwhelming lecture. I'm glad we got it out of the way first thing, but
Me too. Oh my gosh,
antibiotics
yes.
is just something that the more exposure you can get to them, the better.
Yeah, and they didn't make sense until we were in clinical practice.
Yep.
Okay. So, since we've we've talked that one into the ground. Okay, question 2. Do you know of any PA opportunities working with EMS agencies, either as assistant OMDs or doing EMS education or any involvement whatsoever? I guess.
So,
I'll leave it open.
yeah, yeah. So I think that we are moving toward having space in that realm for us to be assistant OMDs. I would love to see us kind of start to step into that role. Maybe it'll happen in the next like 10 years or so. I think this is
Mm-hmm.
definitely going to vary based on where you are in the country. Would love to see that happen here where I'm located. And I think there was a program down in Texas, I think. That's like a paramedic to PA bridge program. Because I had
Ooh.
someone mention on my TikTok, they were like, "Do you know anything about this?" Which I don't. Um, but
By the way, no.
by the way, no, but it sounds like an interesting concept.
Yeah.
There is constantly space in my area though for PAs doing education with EMS, especially if that's your background. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's a lot of like if you just kind of look and listen, you will hear opportunities for you to present posters, do
Yep.
lectures, kind of like everywhere, especially once you get to this point. And so it's just a matter of taking advantage of those opportunities. And if you can integrate yourself into that community in any
Mm-hmm.
way that you can, do it. So, for example, I serve as so I'm married to a firefighter for it hasn't been established, but we'll just go ahead and mention it.
Yep.
Married to a
Mm-hmm.
firefighter. And I serve as the president for our local union's auxiliary. So that's also a way to be involved with our EMS community locally, um, and just know what they need and that sort and be connected to them without maybe like being on the OMD side of things.
Right.
So basically what we do with the auxiliary is we support like firefighter families if anything terrible were to happen, or just like we fundraise for the union and stuff like that. Do community activities, blood drives,
Yeah.
stay connected with our like fire family and that's promote those relationships with the community. So there's a lot of ways to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to look for them. They're
Yeah,
kind of
there
everywhere.
is. I know the only thing that I can comment on with this question, because obviously I've talked about this before, but part of my job is working on the trauma team. So I have 4 different service lines that I do. So I know of, for example, ATLS, Advanced Trauma Life Saving Certification, is required for my job. And I just so happened to go to a academic center for the certification. And at the end, well, they told us in the beginning, but at the end, they pulled me aside and they said, hey, the ACS, the American College of Surgeons, just approved for a PA pilot program for PAs to teach ATLS, which is
Oh,
generally geared towards physicians, EMS personnel, and APPs. So basically it's like a brand new pilot program so you can actually teach, which is really cool. So you're right, there's opportunities popping up everywhere and already
mm-hmm,
established.
mm-hmm.
As far as clinical stuff, the only thing that I know of as far as trauma is concerned is, maybe it's just because of where I am, but I know that shock trauma up in Maryland has a go team. I'm not confident that there's a PA on the team, but I wouldn't be surprised. I do think they have a surgeon. So they have a trauma surgeon on the go team. So if there's going to be a delay in transport, they will fly or drive a team to the field to do like hospital care in the pre-hospital setting as best they can.
Awesome.
If there's
Yeah.
like a prolonged extrication or who knows what's going on kind of thing.
Awesome. Yeah. Like
That's
that
really,
scene in Grays when they go out to the ferry boat accident.
yes, it's just like that.
That
I
is
mean, I don't
cool.
know. I've never done it, but probably. In the military, there are PAs who are flight PAs,
Mhm.
and even like flight surgery PAs. I do know that those exist in the military in particular. I am not in the military, so that will not be me. Um, are there ERPA job opportunities that allow you to see sicker / more critical patients? Is that something that just comes with experience, or is that specifically just job dependent? Like whatever job you take is what you get.
Definitely job dependent. However, the ER is an environment where pretty much anybody could become that sick critical patient at the drop of the hat. You don't always know what you're walking into with every patient encounter. Unless you sign up to only see 4s and 5s in an emergency department, if that is the scope that they're limiting you to, then you will probably not so much get to see that complexity level. But
Mm-hmm.
there are plenty of patients' rooms who I've walked into, and they're assigned like a level 3 acuity. A really good example is abdominal pain,
Yep.
and that just
That can be
spirals.
nothing or everything.
Exactly, exactly. And so, in the role that I'm in right now, I do get to see more complex patients. It's a smaller facility, and it's more. There's more staffing for. I feel more comfortable to take more complex patients. There's no cap on what I can pick up. We basically just pick up off the top, all shift long. So if
Okay.
it's
So if
my
there's a level 1
turn,
and that one's next, you could pick it up.
I could pick it up. Yeah. Um, and if I didn't feel comfortable with it, I could definitely like
Defer.
tag my attending in. Absolutely. But those opportunities to take, critical 2s and critical 3s even are there. And so definitely ask those questions on an interview.
Mm-hmm.
The people interviewing you are hopefully someone on that panel will be an APP from the team that you're applying to who can answer and say, yes, we take blah, 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 or we primarily only take urgent care patients.
Yeah.
So
Right.
ask those questions for sure. Because if you want to be more
Absolutely.
complex, it's in your scope.
Yeah. Okay. So if you had to change specialties, what would
Mhm.
you transition best to? And I'm debating whether saying you can't be a hospitalist PA because you already are one. Even if it's only as needed, I'm going to say you can't be that either.
Okay, so I
You
was
can
about to
come join
say,
me in surgery.
uh,
I
no.
know you don't want to do that. I know. I was
Okay,
like the only one who wanted that.
I was absolutely going to say I would go into being a hospital PA.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Internal
I
medicine, huh?
I do love internal medicine, specifically the hospital environment, because you get to, one thing about my ER people, as much as I love them and that experience, is you don't get to like follow them, you know? And so
Yeah.
that's what I do like and love about being on the inpatient side of things. But if I couldn't do that, um, this is a hard question. I would go outpatient, honestly.
Ooh,
I think that would be the thing that pushed me
that would be the
outpatient.
one.
That would be the one. And maybe I would do either internal medicine or honestly like something like neurology or endocrinology, I think would be really interesting.
Yeah. Because, side note, Julie and I both have undergrad degrees in neuroscience.
We do.
So, okay, how about regarding burnout as an ED provider or new graduate in general? Can you provide any comments on if you've experienced it or just briefly what you do to prevent it or fight it? I already
Yeah,
have felt it, so it wasn't just incoming, it is already here.
sure. Yeah. I think I kind of pushed some of that back by switching jobs so early in the game. I don't think that
hmm
I've really gotten to that point yet. Um, but sometimes I can feel it creeping in. I work a job where I only have to work 3 shifts a week, and I really start to maybe feel it creeping in when I'm like picking up extra shifts. So doing things in my off time that are only like they're strictly for me, I think
Right.
is a good thing to keep. Like if you need to just sit on the couch for a whole entire morning and rot, that's the
There it
term these
is.
days, right?
That's what the kids are saying.
That's what the kids are saying. If you need to couch rot, then absolutely couch rot. The laundry's going to be there, the dishes are going to be there,
Yep,
and take breaks. You know, you cannot take care of yourself or take care of other people if you're not taking care of yourself.
absolutely. So, the final question, which hopefully will take us all the way through to the end, is again, I have plans for a whole different conversation, but briefly, how does the MPH help you in your career, and are your opinions on combination MPH PA degrees?
Heck yeah. So first, oh my
There's the
gosh, Holly
dogs. I love
the
it.
dog has a lot to say about this,
She
obviously.
says yes.
She says yes. So highly recommend the dual degree if you can do it. Our degree was super well laid out and definitely doable the way that they broke down the public health curriculum. It was manageable.
hmm
I am super passionate about improving access to care. And so, working in the ER, I see a lot of patients who do not have regular primary care, who don't have insurance, stuff like that. And so I feel like I work in the perfect environment to use my MPH background because when I'm treating patients, I am taking into account their socioeconomic status, their housing situation, their employment status to
hmm
come up with treatment plans. You know, how are you going to get these meds? How are you going to afford these meds? How can you pick them up? Do you need them delivered? That sort of thing. And so ultimately, I would love to be in a position where I'm kind of serving as a liaison between emergency room patients and like local clinics. I would love to be in some sort of like administrative liaison role for that while still working
Yeah.
clinically. Right now, you know, just using all of the things that I learned in my MPH curriculum to look at patients holistically. So ultimately, we'll get there one day. I'm waiting
It'll
for the
come.
opportunity to come my way. Yeah.
It'll come. It'll come.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I said last question, but I lied. There's another. Um, what advice would you give to any pre-PA or mostly PBA student who is hoping to work in the ER, either for their rotation or the basics of a job hunt? Or what would you tell
Yes.
them if they were
Ask a lot
starting?
of yeah, ask a lot of questions on your interview. We talked about a lot of really good questions during this podcast. Um, and put yourself out there. Don't be afraid. You can ask for help. Know when to ask for help. And then also go to that rural small ER that's in the middle of nowhere because you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have some incredible experiences out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where you're going to get the most exposure to things you may never
Yeah.
see again and
Right.
the chance to do things that you would have otherwise never had the chance to do, either because you wouldn't have seen it or because there would have been somebody else there to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Great
Okay.
experiences will come from that.
Yeah. Okay. That's like exactly 60 minutes. So we did it.
Yay!
We made it all the way through.
We
I
made it.
had so much fun. And
Me
hopefully we
too.
can do it again. I'm
Yeah.
super excited to put this out. And I know everybody's going to love hearing about this because everybody really likes, I think ERPAs are such a hot topic. People like
Heck
the
yeah,
idea of being in the ER.
I agree.
I
It's
I
exciting.
like being in there only sometimes in my job.
Fair. That's fair. It's kind of chaos when you walk in, you know?
Uh-huh. It's like you're right, it's organized chaos, but I think we're both those people who like organized chaos. I don't know if that's a good thing, if that says something bad about us, perhaps it is. I don't know. But
Maybe we're a little bit toxic.
maybe that's a little bit unhealthy that we thrive in organized chaos like an ER in a trauma bay, but regardless, I think you do such good work and I'm so proud of you. And it's, I mean, you're older than me. You're like my big sister now, but
Yeah.
I'm so
Hey,
happy for
thanks,
you.
Issa. Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks so much
okay.
for having me. Look at you with
Yeah.
this whole podcast. It's great. So
We're
proud of
doing
you.
it. We're doing the thing.
We're doing it.